Okay, let's begin. We've been learning the Gemara regarding the laws of throwing food or degrading food, being disrespectful and ruining food as well. And one of the things we were dealing with was contradictions between different statements. One that Shmuel said that you can do anything you want with bread. Adam called a person is allowed to use bread, and the simple understanding was that it's referring to propping up your plate with a piece of bread. Would you be allowed to do that? And we were trying to deal with the fact that there are contradictory statements, and does Shmuel fit with these other statements? So, for example, there's a brisa, a statement of the Tanoic rabbis, the rabbis of the Mishnah. So the brisa says that there's four things that are mentioned regarding bread, and one of them is that you can't put meat on top of bread, raw meat. You can't put raw meat on top of bread. And obviously the reason is you're going to ruin it. Either it's non-salted, so it's going to be non-kosher and it has blood hasn't been removed. You know, we salt the meat in order to get the blood out. And if you put meat on top of bread, so and it has the blood still in it, so the blood will end up getting on top of the bread, and you'll end up ruining some of the bread because of the blood that's non-kosher. And that would be unacceptable to mafsid oichlin, to ruin food. Now, the other explanation was it has nothing to do with the non-kosher element of it. Even if it's kosher meat and it's already been koshered, meaning it's already been salted and washed off and so on, they already koshered the meat. But nevertheless, since it's raw, if you place that meat on top of bread, you're going to make the bread inedible, and that will ruin the bread. So Shmuel says you're allowed to use bread for other purposes than eating, but
not bearing teeth anymore.
But he doesn't say that you would be allowed to. Let me mute everyone 1 second. Shmuel doesn't say that you would be allowed to ruin bread, or be destructive and make it inedible. So that would seem to fit with Shmuel's statement. But then the next statement is you don't pass a cup over bread if the cup is full. Ein ma'avirin kos mole, a full cup you can't pass over bread because it will possibly spill on top of the bread. Rashi interestingly says the bread will be bezuya. Bezuya means disgraced, embarrassed. It'll be degraded, and he doesn't emphasize the fact that it's not going to be edible, but it will be. It's like you're using the bread as a towel to wipe up the spill. That's almost, in a certain sense, it's going to be like the garbage on the bottom. It's going to be absorbing any spill. So it's bezuya, it's inappropriate. And even this, it seems, at least the commentaries seem to understand that Shmuel's statement will fit with that, because Shmuel said you could use it for things, but not necessarily can you do something that's going to either ruin it, make it inedible, or Rashi seems to say it's going to make it bezuya, which possibly he would agree with. That is, this is like making it worse than just using it for a purpose. Yes, Robert. You're muted.
I got it. For me, it's one of two things or both. One, it's a health issue, and the other one is it's a respect for food because of Hashem giving it to us, and we have to respect that because it gives us life, it gives us nourishment. So again, it's dealing with not necessarily kashrut, but again, dealing with preservation of life and not getting ourselves sick.
So this you're correct about that. It's about the God's blessing to us. That second point that you're making. That the second point is mentioned. The first point about health. It seems that we're not dealing with an issue of salmonella or something where you're eating this meat that might be left out, and you're going to eat the bread later on. It could be a problem of bacteria and other other issues. It seems from the Gemara that they knew how to deal with those issues, whether it was because they would eat it right away, or somehow they weren't worried about the health part of it. But the point that you made about doing something that's disrespectful to the blessing that God gave us, that would be the explanation. That would be the main explanation over here. Now, what you're saying is not wrong. It's also true. You got to be careful for your health, and a person does have to take care of themselves. But the Gemara doesn't seem to be concerned about that at this point. That's automatic that you got to be careful.
No, I understand. So right there, it's not. Let's say it's not enumerated, but there's places where you have that as a concern. Right. So that's
right. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Sure. A law and that we have to follow as well. That a person has to be careful for health, just like they have to be careful for Torah laws. You got to be careful for your health. You can't do something that's dangerous and so on. So the third statement. So there were four statements in the brisa. The first one was about putting meat on top of bread. The second one was moving a cup over bread that might spill, and the third statement was to throw bread. That you were not allowed to throw bread. Now, when it comes to throwing bread, here it seems that, again, if you're throwing it on something that's clean, like on the table, it would seem to be permissible. And we have the statement of Shmuel that said that you're allowed to use bread for other purposes than eating. So if you threw it and it didn't get dirty, it's not getting ruined. You're just tossing it to the other side of the table, so you don't have to maybe pass it around all the way around the table. Maybe it's a large table, so you just toss it. So would Shmuel agree with this? So here again, we could say the same thing, that Shmuel he will agree with this, because tossing bread is disrespectful. Even though Shmuel says you're allowed to use bread for other purposes, here that's not really a necessity. You don't have to throw it. If you need to lift up your plate and straighten your plate so it it's not on a stand, that I could understand. Shmuel allows you to use bread for other things. But what about tossing bread, which is not a necessity? You don't need it really. There are other options, and it's not exactly helping. It's not really helping you that much. So and it's much more disrespectful than using bread to hold your plate up. To throw the bread is much worse, much more degrading, and therefore Shmuel maybe will agree with this third statement. But the fourth statement, where he says "Ein soimchen es ha'ka'ara b'pas," that you don't prop up the plate with bread, that's where it seems that he might be arguing. And we mentioned yesterday that Tosfos holds that he's arguing on that last statement. But we did mention that there are other commentaries that disagree, and they say that Tosfos that Shmuel can answer that it depends. If the plate that is holding up has liquid in it and something that could ruin the bread, then you shouldn't use your bread to prop up the plate, because often things spill from the plate and it'll spill onto the bread and it will ruin the bread. You're not going to eat the bread if it has stains of gravy and different things on it that might that look disgusting. So it could ruin the bread, and if it's liquid. But if it's solid, let's say you have falafel balls inside the plate, on the plate, and they spill off onto the bread, it's not a problem. You just lift up the falafel. And
by us, a few drops of gravy on the bread, nothing is left of it anyway. So it's like, if anything, you smear it to get a little extra.
So let me tell you what the question is, Isaac. The question is, since we like smearing stuff on our bread, are you allowed to take a piece of bread and use it as a spoon to scoop up, some marshmallow fluff and peanut butter, hummus or something? You don't really want the bread, but you want to use the bread as a spoon. Would that be allowed according to Shmuel and according to this brisa? Because you're using the bread for a purpose, not for eating, but it is somewhat degrading for the bread. You're using it like a piece of wood, this is really God's blessing to us that we can eat. So this is really where this is a question that is discussed.
At kosher restaurants, they serve French onion soup in a bread bowl.
French onion soup.
In a bread bowl.
But you eat the bread as well.
Out from a
challah. You eat the bread as well.
You can, and you do. And I'm sure when you're using the bread as a spoon, you're going to do that too.
No, the rabbi's question was, what if you don't?
So you have a good point, especially...
Right? I mean, the rabbi's question was, what if you use the bread just as like a spoon, but you don't intend to eat it? So is it a bizayon? And the answer is yes.
If you're so intent that you're not going to eat it at the end, then I would say yes, it is a bizayon. But as long as I know, if I brought out spoons made out of hard challah for the kids to use with the soup, they would love it. It would be a party. Ultimately, they would use it as a spoon, and ultimately, they would eat it.
So
I understand the question.
A spoon from bread would melt.
So the thing is, Ezra has a good
soup.
Yeah, but the bread is still absorbing.
So interestingly enough, it is as Isaac said, there are restaurants that serve it that way.
We didn't get you,
Rabbi. Can everyone hear me?
You're breaking up.
Let me just see. I'm breaking up. Oh boy. Okay. I guess I could go outside. Let me try to walk outside, and there's a bench outside. Let me see if that'll help. Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Much better. Much better.
Better?
Yep, much better.
Uh-huh. Much better.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine. So, so this question about the spoon, well, the thing is, I mean, you have to think about it. We do eat ice cream in cones, and the cone is used to hold the ice cream, but it's also used to eat afterwards. So having, soup in a bowl of bread, in a certain sense, is similar to having a, ice cream sandwich, an ice cream in a cone. It's it seems that it might not be such an issue, but the using a piece of bread to scoop up food. So this seems to be a little questionable. And as Ezra mentioned, that it would seem to be degrading of the bread to just use it as food. Now, the real question is, if you fit this question into the Gemara, there maybe is a difference between Shmuel and the Brisa here, because the Brisa says you can't even use bread to prop up a plate, but Shmuel says you can. So here you may say that this could be a similar case where you're using bread for a different purpose of using it as a spoon, and Shmuel would seemingly allow it, and maybe the Brisa would not. Now, Tosfos over here brings this question, and he says that some have a custom to eat daiso, which is some type of a porridge with bread. And the reason why they do that is since they eat the bread afterwards. So, in other words, the leniency is the fact that you're going to eat the bread afterwards means that you did not ruin the bread. And if you didn't ruin the bread, Shmuel would say it's fine, because Shmuel's main thing is you can't ruin bread, but you are allowed to use bread for another purpose. So if you're not ruining it because you're going to eat it afterwards, then it would seemingly be okay according to Shmuel. Now, the problem is that there is a tractate called Soifrim. It's one of the mini tractates, and it mentions there, Ein oichlin beoichlin. Ein oichlin oichlin beoichlin. We don't eat food
with food
through using other food to eat it. And so that location seems to say, as Ezra said, that this would be disrespectful for the food to eat it with some other food. Now, Tosfos says, according to that, the only way you would be allowed to eat the bread, to eat the food you're scooping up, is if you also eat some of the bread with it while you're eating. So, for example, you're eating marshmallow fluff, and of course, kids love to just eat the marshmallow fluff from the bread and leave the bread. But the proper way to do it would be to eat the marshmallow fluff with a little bread with it each time that you take the bite of the marshmallow fluff that you keep scooping up from the jar, and that would be that would be the way to not transgress this statement from Masechta Soifrim, from where it says over there that you don't eat food with using other food to eat it. And so he says, if you eat it bavas achas, if you eat it all together, you're eating a little of the bread with the marshmallow fluff. That's not a big deal. But then Tosfos says it's possible that statement in Masechta Soifrim doesn't fit with Shmuel. So Tosfos seems to be unsure. He says Shema. Shema means he's not sure, meaning it could be that Shmuel will agree that you should not be using bread as a spoon, even though you could use bread to prop up a plate, but using it as a spoon is more disrespectful to the bread. And therefore, maybe Shmuel agrees, maybe not. So in the halacha, Tosfos is dealing with who the halacha follows like. And Tosfos himself seems to say that it should follow Shmuel. So this would be based on, the question is, what would Shmuel hold in this case? It seems like Tosfos is a little unclear what Shmuel would hold. But there's definitely a thought that it follows Isaac or Ezra. So we have both options here. And Tosfos says Shema, maybe. Okay, so that touches upon the issue of using food for other purposes and using bread for as a spoon. And we had this brisa, and we mentioned the two ways of learning the brisa, if it fits completely with Shmuel or it doesn't, based on the question of what is in the plate that you're propping up. Could we differentiate if it's liquid or if it's solid or not? Do we not differentiate? And we also saw this interesting point that throwing food, according to all, is a problem. You're not allowed to throw bread. That is a definite issue. That even Shmuel, even though Shmuel doesn't, even if it's not going to ruin the bread, it seems to be.
Oh, we lost him again.
Rabbi, you froze. Rabbi, you froze. Oh boy. Rabbi, I think you froze again.
And we lost his image as well.
Yeah, so maybe he's trying to maybe not. Rabbi, can you hear us? We can't hear you. We can't see you.
Maybe if you take the hands off, you'll understand something is going on.
Well, he just passed off Ezra. Ezra, you're the host. It just passed you off as the host. It said on my monitor.
I don't know what to say.
No, I know.
I'm
That's
very much
up.
surprised. I'm very much surprised. I don't know. Hopefully, he's going to try and reestablish
But let's
his link.
continue this. I mean, discussion for me. We may as well use this time. You know, we're not using bread in either a frivolous manner. It's really of utility, right? And so, you know, I remember as a kid, my mother would always say to me, you know, you got to eat your food because there are people starving in China, okay? But there's got to be a basis within Judaism that you don't have food fights. Every time I see a food fight, it's revolting.
No, it's a waste. I agree with you. It's a waste of food.
And that's got to be like a Jewish tradition. You know, you don't waste food. But also, like you said, it can be of utility, but you're using the bread in not a frivolous manner, but just part of the eating process, the conveyance of the food, right? And you usually eat part of it as well. So for me, you know, that's part of the rationale of why. And then how many times have we seen that for Shabbos, when they break the challah, you know, it's not tossed, but it's passed the bread for people then to, again, put the salt on it or whatever and make the bracha as well.
You know, I agree. I mean, the fact that you've created a special bracha for it indicates that you've increased its spiritual level to something else, and so therefore that makes it something special. So for those who don't toss it, all right, then it's very understandable. To use it for something else is, to me, a problem. Right. But the rabbi appears that he's trying to connect. There he is.
Okay.
All right, you're back, Rabbi. Okay.
Almost.
Unmute yourself and take over, please.
Yeah,
my phone froze and got heated up. Okay. Where did I leave? Where did everyone lose me? Does anyone know? Did we finish Taisvis with the spoon?
No, I wanted to say something about that.
Okay, yes.
I wanted to say, when you talk about bread, it depends what kind of bread you're talking about. Because many Gemaras were talking about dipping bread in sauce or in different foods and eating it. And I'm thinking of hummus. The only way to eat hummus is with pita. How else are you going to scoop up the hummus? With a piece of fruit maybe or a vegetable. But most of the people would eat it with pita. Just take a piece of pita and pick it up.
Right, but are you only eating the hummus or are you also eating the pita?
No, you eat both, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no problem there. There you're eating it as food. But what about if you're only eating the hummus? You're using the pita, the hummus.
You mean licking the pita off? No, people eat it with the pita, yeah.
Yeah, but isn't pita have its utility, right? Because hummus is made to either stuff or to scoop it in. It's part of the experience of eating, right? Yeah. So that's part of the total gestalt, the total experience of eating. But that bread,
that's what I'm saying.
Right. What I'm saying, but that's separate from just the challah or other bread that has a soft interior that is the majority of the surface of the bread. But, you know, in some respects,
challah you eat by dipping it into different things.
Right. Or you smear chopped liver on it or whatever.
Yeah.
You really get to understand it when you see the children eating what they like. And they'll eat the cheese off the grilled cheese without eating the bread. You know?
Right.
Right. Well, they don't know better by that. At that point, they have a different basis for eating. It's for, it's for having fun. It's like having s'mores, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
you eat the graham cracker along with the marshmallow. It's right, and the chocolate. It's the whole experience. You can't have one without the other.
So that's the story of using the bread for the other food. That's exactly what it says in Maseches Sofrim, that you ein oichlin b'yoichlin. It sounds like some type of a cryptic statement. Oichlin b'yoichlin. Ein oichlin b'yoichlin. It says it 3 times, the word oichlin, but it means you can't use food to eat food with. And so anyway, Tosfos is unclear if what Shmuel would hold, because the halacha, at least according to many views, the halacha follows Shmuel. And so therefore, there is a reason to figure out what Shmuel, Tosfos would like to know what Shmuel would hold. And the conclusion is that Shmuel would, that Shmuel, Tosfos is unclear if he holds that it's allowed or not allowed. So we have here the Gemara where the Gemara brings these 4 statements, and then the Gemara has a story. And the story is that Ameimar, Mar Zutra, and Rav Ashi, they were eating bread together, and they brought before them these tamri v'rimoini, the dates and the pomegranates, and Mar Zutra, surprisingly, he threw something in front of Rav Ashi. It's a little unclear if he threw a nice portion of these tamri v'rimoini. Maybe he threw meat. Distana means either a portion or it means meat. So it's a little debate among the commentaries what exactly he threw. But basically, he threw some food in front of Rav Ashi. So Mar Zutra and Rav Ashi, we're going to have a little debate now, because Mar Zutra is a little surprised that Rav Ashi is a little surprised that that Mar Zutra threw this distana to him. It's perfect. Good. Thank you so much. So he threw the distana to Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi says, "What do you mean you're not allowed to throw food? Ein zarkin asayichlin. You're not allowed to throw food." So what does Mar Zutra answer? Mar Zutra answered that that's talking about bread. Bread, you're not allowed to throw. Food, you're allowed to throw. So I threw you. It was either meat or it was these dates and pomegranates. He threw food, but he didn't throw bread. You're not allowed to throw. That's what it means. So in other words, Rav Ashi was aware of a statement, a Tanoic statement, that you're not allowed to throw bread. And Mar Zutra said you're not allowed to throw food. Mar Zutra says, no, that's only bread. It's not all food. Now, Rav Ashi comes back with a counterclaim. He says, what do you mean? There's a brisa that says that the same way you can't throw bread, you can't throw food. So that seems to be pretty clear that you're not allowed to throw bread or food, not just bread, right? So Mar Zutra has to answer all this. So he says, there's another brisa that contradicts this. What is the other brisa? The other brisa says, even though you don't throw bread, but you can throw food. So there's clearly a place where it says you're allowed to throw food, and there's clearly a brisa that says you're not allowed to throw food. And both brises say you're not allowed to throw bread. One of them says you can't throw bread or food. The other one says you can't throw bread, but you can throw food. So how do you reconcile these two brises? So Mar Zutra says, you know how you reconcile it? It's not a problem. It's not a question. If you're going to ruin it or if you're not going to ruin it. If you're going to ruin the food, you can't throw it. If you're going to make it disgusting, you can't throw it. If you're not going to make it disgusting, then you are allowed to throw it. And that's how he reconciles these two contradictory brises. Now, the simple conclusion of this Gemara would be that bread, you're not allowed to throw, even if it's not going to get disgusting. You can't throw it. Bread has a special chashivas, special importance to it. But other foods, it depends if it's going to be disgusting if you throw it or not. And that would be the simple way of reading the Gemara. And some of the Rishonim, many of the Rishonim learn it that way. There is a opinion in the Rishonim that says that even bread you would be allowed to throw if it's not going to get disgusting. So that opinion, I'm not exactly sure how they're able to read the Gemara, because that opinion doesn't seem to fit so well. And the reason why it doesn't seem to fit is because Mar Zutra he clearly said there's a differentiation between bread and other foods. Now, if you're going to say that bread you can throw as long as it doesn't get disgusting. So where do you find any difference between bread and other foods? In other words, the way he's explaining it is you can never throw foods that are going to get disgusting, and bread is the same. Bread is included in that same rule. And whenever it says don't throw bread, it means if it's going to get disgusting. But if it's not, you're allowed to throw bread. You can throw it, toss it across the table. It's not a problem. So the question I have, and I have to look it up, and I don't have the books with me here in New York, but the Rashba is the source of that opinion. I have to try to find out how he is able to reconcile the wording in the Gemara, because the Gemara does definitely seem to imply that bread is different than the other foods, and therefore bread you would not be allowed to throw, even if it's not going to get disgusting, and other foods you would be allowed to. And somehow this other one of the Rishonim learns that it falls into the same category, bread and all foods. But the bottom line is that something that is going to get disgusting, you for sure are not allowed to throw. And the Gemara continues, and it mentions that you're allowed to pour wine in some type of sinoidros, some type of pipe. You're throwing it, you're pouring it down a pipe before a chassan and a kala. And this has to do with two things. One concept is siman tov. This is a good sign. This is a good symbol. Just like on Rosh Hashanah, you like to eat apple and honey because it's a siman tov. It's a good sign for going to be a sweet year. So the same thing is pouring wine into these pipes and having wine flow. It's the only thing I can imagine what it's like is some type of a you go in front of these fancy buildings and they have a water fountain, some type of a whole display with water. So and the water shoots out, and somehow by the wedding they would have this type of thing. What is that?
Yeah, we do it now with chocolate.
Oh, right. That's right. They have these. What do you call it? A chocolate something mondo or no? That's not chocolate. A chocolate well or something. Yeah, some type of a spring or something. Anyway, so the chocolate pours down.
Is flowing, and you dip things into the fondue.
Fondue. So the idea. I didn't even now look at that, Isaac.
Chocolate fountain, Rabbi.
What's it called?
Chocolate fountain.
A fountain, right? So the thing is that we might want to sell this idea to the chocolate store. They should be able to promote it. Every wedding they should have this thing. It's a Gemara, right? It's a siman tov. But anyway, the point is that they used to do that with wine, and they would have some type of fountain that the wine would be poured down, and it would be like a siman tov, a good sign, a good symbol for a everlasting wedding with peace and tranquility and pleasantness, and the wedding the marriage should last, and so that would be a reason to pour this wine. The only thing is, are you allowed to use wine for something other than food, than eating and drinking? In other words, you're using wine for an alternative purpose than eating. And of course, the question would be, is it ruining the wine as well? That would be another issue that has to be dealt with. Is this actually ruining the wine? But Ashi over here says that the reason you're doing it is for siman toiv, and it's not bizoyon or hefsid, because you receive the wine at the end of the pipe. You receive it in a vessel, and so they actually would use the wine afterwards. So it was not. So Rashi says it's not considered a bizayon for using wine. Now, why would you think it's a bizayon? Why would you think you weren't allowed to do this? The Brisa tells you you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to pour the wine into these pipes, and seemingly, a person might think that it's not allowed. Now, why would anyone think that it's not allowed? So it could be because that it's slightly degrading. It's using wine for a purpose that's not its purpose. Or the other explanation is that there is a Goyish custom as well that's similar. So you might think that this is following in the ways of the Goyim, and therefore we don't do it. But therefore it has to tell us that even though you might think you can't do that, the Brisa says no, it's not a problem. It's okay. You're allowed to, and it's not considered following in the customs of the Goyim. Now, the Brisa continues, and it mentions about kloyos and agoizim, that kloyos and agoizim, which are these some type of they would throw these stalks of wheat that's roasted wheat and agoizim, walnuts or nuts. They would throw them in the summer, but not in the winter, because they would get dirty. And even though maybe they're theoretically you could eat them even dirty because they have the shell, but nevertheless, it's disgusting. It would get disgusting, and you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to throw them in the winter, only in the summer, when it's dry, when there's no mud. So the way this brisa implies is, number one, you are allowed to use wine for this alternative purpose. And we explained that it has to do with a siman toiv. There's a reason why you're doing it. You're trying to bring out a good sign, bring blessing. There is an opinion that gives a whole different ruling here, and that is that he holds that you're even allowed to you could have a fountain that the wine gets ruined. It goes to the garbage afterwards. The wine ends up not being used afterwards. It's okay. You could still make this fountain. And according to this opinion, it's brought down in the name of the Ravid. According to this opinion, this would be allowed because the reason why this is allowed is because it's called Simchas Chosan V'Kala, which is a mitzvah. So what this means is that when it comes to doing something for a siman toiv, for a good sign, that you wouldn't be allowed to ruin. You wouldn't be, just because for a good sign, you can't just ruin you wouldn't be allowed to just throw out the wine. But according to this opinion, it's not about a siman toiv, it's about Simchas Chosan V'Kala. This is the main joy. And this is a major part of the joy of the Simcha of the Chosan and Kala, rejoicing with them. So that mitzvah, so to speak, overrides the fact that you are ruining the wine. So that would be the Ravid's explanation, that he allows it to be done with wine, but he wouldn't allow it to be done with nuts, because the nuts is is not as much simcha as it is with the wine, and so that would be the other explanation of this brisa. Now, the Gemara continues with a whole new discussion about if a person eats food without a bracha. But before we do that, I just want to mention one other point. And that is that there's an opinion that says that you would be allowed to ruin the wine because there's a statement in the Gemara Psachim. The statement over there says that, interesting statement, it says that the cheap wine you can drink. The expensive wine you should use to spritz because it gives a good smell. And the person who's not wealthy, they're limited with how much with the expensive wine, they should drink cheap wine and use the expensive wine to give the room a good smell. And based on that, the Rav Yah says that wine, there is a leniency to ruin, because ruining wine is not really ruining it, because you're having it spill on the floor, and having it spill on the floor, you're causing the room to have that smell. And we see from that Gemara that there is a leniency to use wine to make a good smell, and that would be acceptable. And so that would be a room for that's an interesting idea. It's brought from the Rav Yah. Interesting law based on a Gemara. So anyway, the bottom line is that the simple way of understanding our Gemara is that you're allowed to pour this wine before the chassan and kala, and we're dealing with, you're not ruining the wine, you're gonna be using it. That would be the simplest understanding of our Gemara, and you're using it. It might look like it looks like maybe you're degraded, maybe you're using it for another purpose, but it's fine. It's a siman tov, and then you have the other leniency that even if you're ruining it, it's considered a simchas chassan v'kala. It's rejoicing and so on. Therefore, it's considered would be considered acceptable. Okay, so now we're going to go to the next piece of Gemara. So the next piece of Gemara talks about this the issue of a person forgetting to recite a bracha. So we are on page 50b, and we're holding Tanu Rabbanon. No, we are holding. Oh, 1 second. Did I skip one?
Before we jump to the new area, just one last question on this.
Yeah.
What about barley that ends up in a shtreimel on Pesach? You know the story?
No.
Oh, the chassan and kala, whatever. A few days later, they're going to one of the in-laws for Pesach, and the chassan's sitting there, and all of a sudden he looks down in the soup. There's a piece of barley in the soup. How could you have chametz, mamish? And it's a whole scandal. They want to break it up, whatever it is. They run to the Rav, and the Rav takes the bacher, not bacher anymore, the guy's shtreimel, and gives it a shake. And a few more pieces come out. So they realize that the chasna, the few days earlier, they had to have whatever it was, a custom to throw barley. Like in America, they throw rice. So they threw barley at the chassan and kala. That was the siman, whatever, bracha, and it got stuck in the shtreimel. No one realized it, but before they realized what it was like a whole scandal, whatever it was. I thought it was a famous Hasidic story. So my only question is, if they're throwing barley at a chassan and kala, I'm just quickly running through my head the issue of bizayon. is that considered a food already if it's raw barley? And that was the last thought that flew through my head. So
I'm so unaware of that minhag, but it's brought. Believe it or not,
me also. I never heard of the minhag either. It's obviously something back in Europe.
Yeah,
but
no, not Europe. It's in the Gemara. It's in the back of the Gemara. The Rabbeinu Yoina, Tamid Rabbeinu Yoina brings it, that there's a minhag in many places to throw wheat and barley on the chassan and kala when they bring them to the chuppah. So he says it's not appropriate to do only in the summer or in the winter if it's dry out, because you could gather it afterwards and eat it. But if if the earth is wet, you're not allowed to throw it, because
it's going to be a bizayon one way or the other. You're not allowed to do it.
And he says, so what it sounds like is in the olden days they didn't care if it's something fell on it grows on the ground. I guess they didn't care so much if the wheat touches the ground, as long as you collect it afterwards, and then it's not a problem. Now, the Shita Mekubetza says that you shouldn't. You should be careful to do it. But he says, and this is mentioned, and this is where Isaac, what I wanted to bring out, because you came up with a thought that's mentioned in the early rabbis. The Shita Mekubetza mentions Yesh Oimrim, that chitim are not called significant food regarding this. In other words, it's not cooked. It's just a piece of barley, a piece of wheat. You know what I mean? It's not actual food. And this is what you were saying, that it's only when it's actual food, it's not edible. And therefore, it wouldn't be a problem. And that would be the reason why it would be permissible to throw it, because because it's not actual food. So along the lines of what you were saying, I just was not aware that it was but that's a shocking story, a very sad story, actually, on Pesach, and then blame the in-laws. Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. The typical good ending is the one who does the blaming is the one who ended up making the mistake.
Right.
And he didn't check his own shtreimel. Right.
That's another story.
It comes around.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you should throw rice.
Listen, I'm
sure only at Sephardi weddings.
Yeah, Ashkenazic Jews will not be too happy if they find rice in their soup on Pesach. But halachically, you're right. It's not such a big deal, because it's usher to eat, not usher bahana. But anyway, all right. So let's go back to the Gemara here, 50b. And there was one point that I didn't go over, and that is that the gluskois, which we translated as rolls you can't throw, whether in the winter or in the summer. And we mentioned that it's interesting that Rashi says that the reason is because they're nimas, they become disgusting when you throw them. Now, we just explained the early Gemara to mean that bread you can't throw even if it's not disgusting. Bread has like a higher level of significance to it that you wouldn't be allowed to throw, even if it's not disgusting. So therefore, there's okay, waiting for the emergency vehicles to pass. Therefore, there's reason to say that the gluskos don't mean rolls, but maybe they mean some other baked food that we're dealing with, and therefore Rashi has to emphasize that it'll be disgusting if you throw it, even in the summer, because I guess it'll absorb dirt. And however, if you learn that it means bread, so it would seem that should be prohibited, even if it's not going to be disgusting. And the only way to explain Rashi is it could be Rashi argues on the assumption that I gave earlier, which is that there's only one view that says that bread you can throw. Maybe Rashi also holds that bread could be Rashi holds that you are allowed to throw bread as long as it doesn't get disgusting. In other words, it could be Rashi agrees with that with the Rajba. But bottom line is that the gloskos, the Gemara says you cannot throw, and whether in the winter or in the summer. Okay, so that really, I think that concludes everything from before. Okay, so we're now at the bottom of the page 50b, and we're about 6 lines up from the bottom of the page. Amar Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda says, Amar Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda says,
Rabbi,
Shachar, if a person forgot to recite a first bracha, and he entered food into his mouth, without a blessing, he should move it to the side, to one side, and in order to recite the bracha, and he says the bracha. So he pushes the food in his mouth. He can't have it falling out when he's saying the bracha. He pushes it to the side, and you say the bracha. Tanya Chadam, we learned in a brisa, Boilan, that a person forgot to recite a bracha, and he has it in his mouth, he should swallow the food without the bracha. V'tanya idach, and we learned a second brisa, another brisa, poiltan, he should spit it out. V'tanya idach, and we learned the third brisa, mesalkon, you push it to the side. So Rav Yehuda said, you forgot food, and you ate it, you didn't say a bracha, and you put it in your mouth, put it to the side and recite the bracha on it, and then you could swallow it. And then we brought 3 brisas. One says, you just swallow it. The other one says, spit it out. And the third one says, put it to the side, as Rav Yehuda said. Now, the Gemara says, lo kasha, but there's really no contradiction because it depends what type of food we are dealing with. Hadatanya, this that we learned, boilan, that you should swallow it. It's talking about b'mashkin, talking about liquids. Liquids you can't put to the side of your mouth. And also, you can't spit it out because you're not going to be able to eat it afterwards. So therefore, liquids you should swallow. The brisa that says you should spit it out, that's b'midi delay mimis. That's something that's not going to be disgusting when you spit it out, like maybe a nut or a piece of grain. So these type of things you would you could spit it out because it's not going to be disgusting to put it back in your mouth. It's still whole. And Vahadatanya misalkon, in this that it says that you should put it to the side, b'midi de mima, something that's going to be disgusting if you spit it out. And so therefore, just put it to the side. If it was a drink, you can't put it to the side. You have to drink it. It's not going to work. But if it's food, you could stick it to the side, like maybe grapes or something. You're chewing on grapes, so you could push it to the side, recite the bracha, and then you could swallow it. So the best way possible, what comes out from here, is to spit it out, but you can't do that if it's going to be disgusting. So therefore, you have these other options. Now, Gemara continues and on the next page and says, one second. Yeah, next page, page 51a. Page 51a, the midi delay mimas, the Gemara asks, the midi delay mimis, nami lasalkina latzadechad v'levare. What about something that's not disgusting? Why do you have to spit it out? Why is it better to spit it out Just push it to the side. V'lavarech, and recite the bracha. What's wrong with that? So the Gemara answers that Tirgama Rav Yitzchok Kaskasa. So Rav Yitzchok Kaskasa explains that Kamei de Rav Yosef Barav and Mishmei de Rav Yochanan, the name of Rav Yochanan. So he says the reason is Mishum Shenemar Yimoli Pi Tihilasecha. My mouth should be filled with your praises. So basically, we're trying to understand why is it best to spit it out? And the answer is because your mouth should be filled. You shouldn't have anything else in your mouth at the time when you are praising Hashem, like at the time of a bracha. Your mouth should be filled with praises of Hashem. And that's why it's ideal to not have anything in your mouth. Well, it's right. Only in this emergency situation where you ate something, and that would be a leniency to put it to the side to recite the bracha. But really, you shouldn't have anything in your mouth when you say the bracha. Now, this is a very practical halacha, because what happens if you're in the middle of eating something and you want to take a drink? So you really should try to swallow everything before you say the bracha on the drink, because you don't want to have anything in your mouth when you're saying the bracha. And this applies also sometimes women when they wash the al natilas yodayim, so they take off their ring. Where do they put their ring? In their mouth, right? So they put their ring in the mouth, so they should make sure that when they say the bracha, they should make sure that it's not still in their mouth when they're drying their hands or whatever. They should be careful that it's not still in their mouth when they say the bracha. So these are just a few practical applications of this law, and also what it means is that your whole mouth should say the bracha, which would mean not to mumble it. Malei pi tehilasecha.